from the Crypt.
Hello, boils and ghouls. Welcome to a mini episode of Dads from the Crypt. My name is Jason, and today I'm joined by Kristen Lopez. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, it's always great to get to hang out and talk. I hadn't seen the new opening, so that was very, very fun for me.
Oh, yeah. Cool. So Mondo and Jody are at Chattanooga Film Festival. So we're switching a couple things around for the schedule this week. In case you didn't hear the last episode, we are putting the Mike Vosberg documentary on YouTube on Monday to fill in a little bit. But I also happened to see 20 years later, and I have so many thoughts bouncing in my head. I needed to talk it out, and I saw Kristen did a wonderful review online. So we're just gonna talk about that movie and just kind of bounce some thoughts and stuff back and forth. So if you're listening to this on the regular podcast feeds, you can go check out the Mike Vosberg documentary. He's the one who did all of the Crypt artwork from the TV show on YouTube. If you're listening to YouTube, then you can also listen to this episode on the regular podcast feed as well. So before we dive in, Kristen, what's you have a new book coming out, and also tell me the progress on your Crypt book.
Yeah, so I have a book coming out November 13th. It's called Popcorn Disabilities. It's talking all about disability representation in film, the good, the bad, the me before you of it all. So it's a little labor of love. Something that I thought would not be incredibly hard to write, and it was. So yeah, I'm excited that it's finally going to be out in November for the fall. And then welcome Boils and Ghouls. The complete oral history of Tales from the Crypt is we're in the writing stage now. I have a couple stray interviews left, but for the most part, everybody that I'm going to talk to, I have talked to. So we're in the writing and trying to corral 150 different people's voices into one narrative, so it's a lot of me spending time at my computer, just putting together a puzzle, being like, okay, I like this quote. Where can I kind of stick it where it'll have a natural kind of through line with everybody else? So it's a move-in. The only change is that I needed to ask for more time because my first book that I did for TCM, they wanted a second one in December of last year. So that will be out next year, which is great. But in order to write it, I had to kind of put the Tales book back a little bit. So that is now coming out August of 2027. So, but it is in the writing stage. So I'm just, I get to lovingly look at the clock and count down to appropriately enough Halloween, which is when it's due. So yeah, no pressure at all.
No. Oh, good. All right. Well, like many people, we're all eager and excited for it.
I'm glad. It's keeping me going.
Yeah. All right. So again, our reason for talking tonight is the new sequel, which again is one of those things I never thought would happen, especially with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. They're like, this is one of those things like 2 or 3 years ago. I wouldn't have bet money on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think a lot of people, the first movie came out in 2002. They did not do the sequel in 2007, which is 28 Weeks, which is also a very good movie. I have a fondness for that. And so I think that a lot of people figured they didn't come back for the sequel. They certainly weren't going to come back for this, let alone almost 25 years later from when the first one came out. But, everything old is new again. And what is the quickest way to make money and get something sold in Hollywood? Reboot or sequelize something that already exists. So it was only a matter of time before the IP came back.
We'll put a pin in that because I have a lot that's what I think is most interesting about this. But I love the first one. It is probably the only zombie movie, whatever you want to call it, that really, really scared me.
Yeah.
And in the theaters, it was really intense. And then I remember I bought it on DVD right when I moved out of my parents' house after college for the first time. And I moved in with a friend, this house on the top of a hill, and a snowstorm happened to come. And he went to go spend time with his parents, but I decided to stay there and just set up stuff and get used to it. So like I watched it, and while I was like unpacking and setting things up, I didn't see a single person for like 2 days after watching it. And that like the isolation during like a snowstorm like that really messed with my head. So it's one of those movies that's like has stuck with me.
Yeah, it's one of those where, I remember going to see it in the theater when it came out. Famously enough, it's probably the first male full frontal nudity I'd ever seen in my life. I remember the opening camera shot of Cillian Murphy in the bed, the aerial cam, and I just remember out of the corner of my eye seeing a hand just like come in front of that. The damage was done. The damage was done. It didn't really matter.
Was that your mother or your father?
It was my mom. Yeah. My dad was sitting somewhere, but I honestly don't even know if he cared. But it's one of those where, I realized that I hadn't seen it probably in about a decade at least since it had come out. And it's incredibly hard to find to stream. It's not available. But thankfully Pluto was showing it recently and I sat down to revisit. And, I don't think people understand. And there was a person, and I put this in my review, but there was a young guy that was in the theater with us. And when we left this movie, he's like, well, what did you think? And I told him what I thought. And he said, well, I've never seen any of these movies, so this is my first one. And I don't think a certain generation understands the significance of 28 Days Later in 2002. The lo-fi look of it at the time, the fact that it had no big name characters or actors. Cillian Murphy was not established here in the US. Naomi Harris was not established here in the US. And all of that was kind of intentional. It's coming out post, Blair Witch Project, which is pretty much like the last. This is the last gasp of movies that can kind of live on gimmicks, like Blair Witch, The Ring, this, where you could kind of come in with a movie and make people maybe doubt for a second that things is this real? And I think the fact, a lot of people put a lot of pressure on like fast zombies, that these are, and it's not necessarily a zombie thing. It's more of a virus. So I think there's a lot of things that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, Alex Garland was not a tested entity. He was better known as an author. So there's a lot of like quantifiable things here that were very different than the world that they're coming back to with this one.
Right. And I mean, Danny Boyle is, I don't want to say he's underrated, but like he's such a chameleon in the different movies he's made. Every time I look at his filmography, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe he made that. So like he made the Steve Jobs movie, which is excellent. 127 Hours, Slumdog Millionaire, The Beach, Train Spotting. I'm sure there's plenty more. Millions, Sunshine. Like he's a kind of director you can't really put a pin on, except that he's just always interesting.
Yeah, Danny Boyle. I mean, I always say Danny Boyle has more hits than misses, in my opinion, because I tend to love stuff that he does. And people forget Danny Boyle. I mean, Slumdog Millionaire is the Oscar pony. He did the Olympics, I think, the opening ceremonies for the Olympics. So he was clearly, he's always that director that I think people forget technically now is big, but can take time between his projects, to do kind of quirkier, weird stuff. And I think a lot of the reasons he's not vaunted alongside like a Spielberg or something like that is that he takes breaks between his work, and he doesn't stick to a genre or a topic, and he really just seems to make movies that I think only he is interested in, which, if anything, the hot take I have about Boyle's work is that I love Danny Boyle when he's weird. I know Train Spotting is very much an iconic piece of the zeitgeist, changing the kind of view that we had of Britain and British filmmaking. It's not a movie that I love, but I understand its significance in the 90s. But for me, like, I tell people one of my favorite Danny Boyle movies is the movie he made after Train Spotting, which is Life Less Ordinary, this weird screwball kind of in the vein of Defending Your Life type of story that made no money, you know, but it showed that he could make kind of a romance film. Shallow Grave is a Black comedy, kind of like a Kind Hearts and Coronets type of thing. I'm probably the one apologist that loves Trance, because it's like, what if we made a heist film, but we also made it about domestic violence, which I saw a lot of commonalities in the tonal shifts with this movie. So I love Doyle.
I was gonna ask.
Yeah,
I was gonna ask if you saw Trance. I remember seeing it like forever ago. I was like, that's a movie.
Trance is a weird, it's such a weird movie, but I think what I love about it, I mean, it's very slick. It's kind of got this weird, like, little Soderbergh type of feel to it, but then it's got, again, this just utterly batshit social twist to it of like, we should treat women better. It also uses nudity to like shockingly jarring effect, much like this one does. I think the only critique I keep having about Trance every time I see it, it's the one time I will tell you I wish AI did exist to put in Michael Fassbender, because you can clearly tell that the role was not built for Cassell. It was supposed to be for Fassbender. He couldn't do it. And you're just like, this doesn't work as well. But it's still very much in that era of like, we still loved slick, kind of fun movies. And Trance is just a fun movie. And I think that, it's, so for me, I knew kind of like trust in Boyle, trust in the weirdness a little bit.
Trust me, if I had the time and the money, I would AI Michael Fassbender into every movie of all time.
And I say that as somebody who does not, I've only seen the Steve Jobs movie once. I remember people forget the Battle of the Dueling Jobs biopics that we had. I've only seen it once, and I think my dislike of the movie is very similar to my dislike of when Molly's Game came out. You can't really tell a whole story about a shitty man and then be like, but his daughter might love him. I'm like,
no. Any biopic should, you have to take it with like a huge spoonful of sugar. They're doing this because they obviously admire the person, so they're going to color them much nicer than they really are, and they're not quote documentaries, so it's not all true. Another thing that he did that I want to highlight real quick, he did I really wish I could have seen this. He did a live production of Frankenstein with Benedict Cumberbatch and Stoney Lee Miller. I'm not familiar with that guy, but the gimmick kind of was that every night they would flip roles, where one guy was Frankenstein, the other guy was Frankenstein's monster. And I think you can even watch it somewhere. So it's one of those things.
You can watch it. I think like National Theater Review or something, like it's one of those.
And that was before the Cumberbatch overexposure I think we got throughout the 2010s. All right. But that takes us, to 28 years later. I love the marketing for this. It was just very visual. I know I usually don't stay away from trailers, and I watched the first one with that really cool like spoken word bit. And I don't know, either they didn't put out many other trailers, I just happened to not see them. So I was going into this like, I don't know what this movie is about or any character beats. So I went into it very, very cold. And my overarching feeling about this movie is, we can call it a legacy sequel. I don't know exactly what the definition of that is, but it's a sequel that comes out a significant amount of time after the original. And I think, and again, like we're getting Spaceballs 2, and they made a little trailer that made really a lot of fun of that. And I think he said, usually a legacy sequel brings back legacy characters, is a plot that's somewhat reminiscent of the original. It has a bunch of callbacks. There's like all these boxes that all these legacy sequels seem to tick. And I think his goal with this movie was to not do any of that, to go as far away from any other legacy sequel tropes. And like, you could call this something completely different and released it. Again, obviously with the name, you're connecting people, to a property that they're going to be more likely to see. But it could just been Danny Boyle's something else, and it would have fit just fine.
I mean, I don't necessarily think this is a legacy sequel, if only because the franchise hasn't really established anything legacy so far. I mean, 28 weeks later is only connected to 28 Days Later because it's set in England and it's from the events of the Rage virus. Other than that, the characters don't translate. The opening is similar because you still have like a jarring, kind of shocking, hyper violent opening sequence. So I think it takes the beats. I'd be interested to see what the next one,
Mhm.
28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, which comes out in January, does, because that is going to carry over characters from this film and also possibly bring back characters from the first one. Danny Boyle's alluded to Cillian Murphy coming back. So I think that at that point, we'll have more of a connection. But I've always appreciated, at least between the first two and with this one, kind of not creating continuity, creating that this is different pockets of one location that
Mhm.
is dealing with this, and focusing it in this iteration on this very small island. Post, of course, Danny Boyle's talked about how it's very Brexit influenced. This
Mm.
isolated kind of small town world. I know he said Brexit. I saw a lot of it like New Zealand during COVID, when they were able to kind of live normally because they had implemented extreme measures of prevention for COVID. So you can make kind of a political element to it really, really quickly. And I like that it's showing, okay, like there are parts of this world that have stayed normal. Keep in mind also, this is supposed to be in the future. I think this is supposed to be about like 2030, because 28 years from
Right.
2002. So there's more of a kind of futuristic element to it as well. So I appreciated that it didn't necessarily have a continuation to the previous two, but I did have questions kind of about where we are in this world, because if you've seen the end of 28 weeks, the movie ends with, you've had this kind of the Americans took over, and were helping to corral the zombie invasion. Of course, that all fell apart, and the movie ends with them, I think, going to finding zombies in France.
Yeah, they like Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, so the question is it a spread? So, but there's no discussion of that, like, at
Well,
all. It's very unclear of whether this is a worldwide thing at this point.
there is a little blurb at the beginning that said like they were able to push it back from Europe. So it seemed like it did reach Europe, but they were able to keep it contained.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like
but
one sentence,
other than
but
that, yeah, you don't really know about like what the world looks like 28 years later from this.
mhm.
You see snippets. You eventually meet a military guy from Sweden. So clearly, like, Sweden has some skin in the game. But
They have
I
iPhones in this
yeah, I
in
think
this
the
future.
big issue I had is the same issue I had with Civil War, which is the other Alex Garland movie
Mm.
that he's done recently, where I'm like, you kind of need to set up the geopolitics a little bit of where we are and how things fit. And I think it, much like Civil War, Garland was just like, yeah, no, not going to explain
Well,
why they fit.
like in Civil War, I definitely wanted to know more, but I understood that he wanted to leave it ambiguous to not try to like put the movie on one side of an issue or another and kind of keep it kind of like one size fits all. I can understand that. And this one, yeah, we could have definitely used more. And my question is, so okay, so they've pretty much isolated the UK, but like they're just leaving those people there. Like they could easily be like airdropping supplies, or like they could get I mean, right now you can give satellite internet to anyone anywhere, and just like they could give them like iPads, so they could at least like give them a communication or like give them something to work off of for society.
Yeah, I mean, Starlink exists, unfortunately, so we can
Well,
use that. I mean,
the
and
technology
when
does.
when you see the island that the little boy, our main character Spike, lives on, they're living very much like, kind of like the Amish, like
Mhm.
they don't have machines, they don't have anything. But I'm like, 2002, we did have computers, we did have tech, we had phones, like, we have things. And it's very unclear why they are so like Mennonite, or something like that. So I would have appreciated. And the other thing too is, clearly, like, the world, like England, has been maintained, like, taken back to nature, but there is no discussion of like is this a thing where, you know, every 99.9% of humanity in England is dead? You know, what you kind of, it doesn't necessarily need to be something where you really belabor it, but even like,
Right.
you know, a newscast or a radio broadcast, you know, to kind of set people up to be like, this is the future we live in, and here we go.
I mean, yeah, I was like, I was thinking if this was a real world thing, there would be like organizations to try to help support these people. Like, again, doing airdrops or like at least connecting them with the outside world. Just because they're quarantined doesn't mean they can't, like, you know, get
Yeah, I mean, they have to
TV
design
or
it pretty
something.
well populated. Like, are these people just, you know, left to their own devices? Like, clearly
Yeah.
none of them are sick. So why wouldn't the military or whomever want, you know, the UN or whatever want to come and like provide aid for that? That's kind of like saying like we annexed all of Africa and we're just gonna forget they exist, you
Now,
know, or something like that.
now, again, being that's 28 years later, they could have easily said that they were doing supply drops, but the rest of the world decided, got bored, or like forgot about us or something
Yeah,
like that. They could
sure.
have easily like yada yada that. Like, okay, that makes sense. After 28 years, I could see the rest of the world. Like, there would still be some places, but like the drops get fewer and fewer, or they just stop coming to certain areas.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. I mean,
the rest of the world
there's
just
ways to
stopped
explain
caring.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, there were, okay, so just getting there were a couple more things like that that kind of bugged me, and I'm very much a logical movie person, because when logic breaks, it like breaks the movie for me a little bit. So I mean, we're not going to go beat by beat or anything. We're going to skip around, and obviously we're doing spoilers if you made it this far. So like there's a point where, first of all, I really liked the first half, and I really thought the father was gonna. I thought the movie was going to be the father is going to sacrifice himself for the kid while he's on his trip, inaugural trip into the mainland, and the whole movie would be about this boy fighting to get home. And I was like, okay, I kind of settled into that. But then when that kind of ended, you're like, okay, what's the rest of this movie going to be? Oh, there's this doctor. Like, oh no, he's not going to take his mother all the way to see this doctor, and that's exactly what he does. And I find that a really hard pill to swallow. That I can understand him
There's a
wanting to do.
lot of like things where I kept saying it feels like Boyle's greatest hits, and that's kind of where I was okay with certain things. I mean, yeah, the first half. I mean, it's the opening scene is pure 28 Days Later. I mean, you know, anytime you're gonna massacre a group of children while they're watching Teletubbies, like all bets are off. The opening makes not a lick of sense until the end of the film. I kept waiting. I was like, oh, is
Yes,
Aaron Taylor Johnson's the kid, right? At the opening of this movie. We'll strap in. We'll put a pin in that and come back to it because, yeah. I was like, he called the priest dad. What is going on there? Like, what is happening? You know,
yeah.
so that kind of sets the tone. And then we cut to this island, you know, and I mean, I'm an ATJ stan. I will watch Aaron Taylor Johnson read the, you know, phone book, and he's
Oh,
rocking
so
that.
you're a Craven supporter.
Oh no, that movie is horrible. It's utter shit. I didn't even finish it. There are limits to my love. But he's got like this big mountain man beard. He's like he's clearly still got the Craven look because all his shirts look like they're straining. You know, he's got a mouthful of marbles. It's fantastic. And yeah, you really kind of believe that the dynamic is going to be this father-son story of this guy that, you know, doesn't want his son to be weak, and, you know, pretty much tells everybody like, my kid killed 18 zombies on the first day. He's awesome, right? You know, and there's a lot of really just very cool kind of percussive beats. I
Oh yeah,
hated the overwrought splicing in of footage from like military footage and
yeah.
you know, old Hollywood crusader films while Rudyard Kipling's Boots plays. I'm like, we get it. You're pretty much saying like they're going to war. It's the Hollywood like, you know, again, that's the Garland where I was just like, tell me this is somebody let Alex do whatever he wants for the first half of this movie.
Like, oh, like maybe once would have been fine. Just to
Sure,
like,
yeah,
okay, you get your little flourish out of the way, but then to keep it going, it's like
and
I'm.
it doesn't come back after that first half. It's never employed
Mhm.
again, you know. So if you're going to do it, be consistent, you know, or don't do it at all. But it's really tense. I mean, it's hyper violent. It sets up the fact that
Mhm.
there's kind of levels to the zombies, and there's these new zombies that are bigger and stronger and super naked, but then that plot line ends, and it turns into this really, sad story of a kid trying to find a magic cure for his dying mom. And that's where I kept saying, I'm like, okay, so the first half of this movie is the beach. It's this languid kind of a story about an isolated utopia that's anything but. And now we're doing Millions, which Millions, if you haven't seen it, is a story about this kid who finds like a sack full of money. It's a very heartwarming family film, and I was just like, oh, okay, so this is Danny Boyle's What If Millions Had Zombies in It? Which again, I mean, I think Millions is very sweet. I think it's very cute. And I was really fascinated with the film's central premise. This is what I think the movie's central conceit is, is the fact that it's a story about memorializing the dead, and I know Boyle's talked about like so much has happened in the last 25 years in, history, whether that's, terrorist attacks, whether that's wars, whether that's a pandemic. Like we have had, just so many big moments. I put that in air quotes, big moments in history. And we have not stopped as a society to collectively deal with any of that. And, with Spike and his mom going to find Ray Fiennes, whose character's pontificating, quoting Shakespeare next to this skull tower, his reiteration is like, you have to remember everybody dies and you have to memorialize them. And I thought that was really fascinating. Then I'm like, this is where we went. We went to your dad is the town whore, like making out and doing stuff with other women, to your mom definitely has cancer. Like we all knew it from beat one, to this really just bittersweet, melancholic story about like, let's talk about 3 movies and everybody is dead, and we're all going to die. And I was just like, I didn't know I needed this. Like, I feel like lately I've been saying a lot of movies this year have been really, really just like depressed. And I feel this movie is the most depressed of all, but its depression matches mine at the moment, where I'm just like, yeah, you know what? Everything is bad. And you know what? This movie is with the orange iodined Ray Fiennes is just, it's hitting me where I live right now.
I totally forgot he's even in this movie. Somebody shows up. I'm like, wait, is that Voldemort? He's in this?
I was a little shocked. He looks so much like Christopher Eccleston when he shows up. I was just like, Eccleston didn't fare well in the first film. He wasn't our friend. But I mean, it's so funny to see, like conclave daddy Ray Fiennes, like in this movie. And don't forget, like he's got to be the guy that like puts down Bambi's mom, the equivalent. There's a baby involved in all of this.
We'll get to that in a second. I think, and again, I don't know if it's because there's 2 more movies, they didn't want to take too many characters off the board, but I was surprised at how few survived. I was expecting the father to bite it at many points. I was expecting Ray Fiennes to not make it, like, and then they're all kind of like, okay, and then nothing happens. But again, they're setting up more, which I'm assuming we're going back to all those characters. And I was waiting for
I know Fiennes is definitely in the next one. I don't think I've heard anything about Aaron Taylor Johnson being in the next one.
I'm sure he is. He has to.
But it would make sense, for him to be in it.
And I think a lot of what this movie is doing is trying to subvert your expectations, which again, I like it when movies try to do that. I like it when they're not trying to do the same thing, when they're doing unique things. So again, like your article says, there's a lot of really big swings in this movie. No, I don't think, I wish more of them worked per se. Again, without the full context of the vision of the next 2 movies, maybe in hindsight they will. No, I don't think as much of it works for me personally. But I'd rather them do these things that are interesting but don't work than not do anything interesting.
It's one of those movies, and I often wonder how much filmmaking and writing has changed with people now not necessarily needing to be in the same room together to get stuff done. Like a screenwriter can write something and then you can have your director on Zoom. You don't necessarily need that union. And so I think there's a tendency for audiences to notice when maybe films are kind of written piecemeal. So this, I think, is a great example of a movie where you can kind of clearly see, and this is all spitballing. Somebody could say like, how do you know you weren't in the room with any of them? I was not. But it feels like that first half is very Alex Garland. That
Yeah.
percussive, we do a lot of the freeze framing, like the war photo snaps when like things connect with zombie heads. Again, that was something that was done in Civil War. So it feels a lot like Garland did the first half. And then that second later half is very Boyle, with the kind of contemplative story of appreciating life, this weird like social twist that comes into things. And then the third act, they're just like, well, shit, we have another movie we got to tie still. Like you can just see them kind of like knitting the threads together. That does not make the movie not fun to watch, but
No.
it very much feels like a movie where it's got some big peaks and valleys.
Yeah, as I'm talking this through, it really reminds me of, and this is going to be very appropriate, is the Candyman movie that came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, which directed by Nia DaCosta, who is doing Bone Temple.
Yeah, which I felt like was a great movie in lots of bits, but they're all kind of smashed together where you can feel like, okay, this might be a Jordan Peele sequence. This is a Nia DaCosta sequence. I think there's another writer or two on there. And a lot of it just kind of pushed together, and I like the bits, but it just doesn't come together. And that's how kind of I feel about this movie. It doesn't really gel as like a whole like meal.
No, I mean, a great zombie movie always has a very A through B through line, right? Which is like characters are holed up here. They're trying to get to here, and that's where they're gonna find either salvation or, help or something. There's always something, a light waiting at the end of that tunnel. And we don't get any of that. Yes, Spike and his mom are going on a journey they're off to see the wizard kind of type of thing. But the movie pretty much kind of like kicks you in the face where it's like, yeah, but the wizard can't cure cancer actually. So, you're kind of screwed, which I appreciate about, I'm all for a movie that like at the end of the day says like, it doesn't matter that you're a really cute little boy and you have good intentions and you love your mom. Like, life sucks. I'm all for a movie that does that, but it does need to, I think, set things up in a certain way. And if the dynamic had been established, it's kind of set up in the beginning. You don't really know what Spike and his dad are like, other than that one moment, when they're confined together. You don't know. There's a tension, but that's kind of it. And, he clearly sees his dad cheating on his mother, and his mother is suffering from some sort of brain illness. But those are just kind of like shaky little, post-its that don't really define a relationship. I think had he been going and the dad was trying to redeem himself by going after them, even though, they're not supposed to go after them, I think that might have been just enough thread to kind of like tie everything together.
Right. And then, again, back to Ralph Fiennes. Somehow he's got his hands on like unlimited supplies of iodine and morphine.
Yeah. I was just like, where are you getting this, sir? Like you could, do pretty well. Do you have a cell phone? Do you have an iPod Shuffle or something? Like, what do you have?
They establish that there's these big alphas that are going around, and they're like, the big badasses. And he hits the alpha with morphine, and then he's just kind of standing there all stone. And it's a really great moment. But then I'm like, slit his throat. He's right there.
Yeah, it's not really clear what he's doing. Is he studying these people? Also, like, what are the alphas? Are they, the little boy mentions that he's told that they're like something on steroids, whatever those are, because the little boy doesn't know what steroids are. But like, are they evolved? Is it natural evolution? Is there some sort of experimentation happening?
Or is the virus mutating?
Yeah, like what has happened to make them? And they're all kind of like blurring the line between being like wild people of the woods and maybe just hippies. Like, like they're all scraggly. They all are naked. They're clearly having sex because they're impregnating each other. But the baby isn't a zombie because we explained the miracle of the placenta, which I'm still like,
yeah, no.
okay, I
Because
maybe.
there are obviously there's cases of mothers who get like illnesses like HIV or whatnot that pass it on to their in utero children.
Sure. And my whole thing, I said something similar where I was like, well, I know like with COVID, when mothers get COVID, they pass on antibodies to their children. So I'm like, again, is this going to tie into something where this child's going to be some sort of example or experiment for like why she's not ill? Are there thousands of these babies just scattered around the world, like around the area? Because the mothers clearly don't know what to do. Are they eating them? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would like to know some of these things, because I think what I noticed in there's a main alpha he calls Samson, one of the big significant characters of color, which I'm not really sure if the movie does right by characters of color.
Or was he just dirty? I couldn't tell. Like,
I thought he was of color, and I think the actor is of color as well.
Okay.
So but it's clear that there is awareness. There's the scene where the zombie is giving birth and she bears down with Jodie Comer and doesn't try to eat her right away. And the male zombie is going for the baby. And the question is it to eat the baby, or is that there's a connection? There's a parental connection, and he is aware that is his child and he wants it back, which, you know what? Fair.
Right. So I thought that's what the climax of the movie was going to be, was the alpha going after Spike as he's trying to get home with the baby, and then in the end he's gonna give the baby over to the alpha, and the alpha's just gonna walk away or something. Which again is the cliche movie thing that we're expecting, and I like that they're subverting things, but I feel like they're trying so hard to subvert things so often that just kind of throws us off balance.
It's a question. It's a question of what is subversion and what is because they back themselves into a corner and don't know how to get themselves out. And I think that's unfortunately what this movie fails at the most, which is that it does feel that like it hits a wall, and instead of like scaling the wall, it's just like, you know what? We're going to take the spoon and we're just going to dig through it, and whatever happens, happens.
I think one of my favorite characters was the Swedish soldier that they run into. I thought that was I really enjoyed that because it's someone who's aware of the outside world that we are aware of, that we're used to, and he's interacting with them, and like he doesn't know what a phone is. He doesn't know a woman with Botox or lip fillers or whatever. I could have done again. I would have split this movie into two. I know they already got two more sequels, but like I would love to see more of those two characters, Spike and Eric.
He gave me some Plemons vibes in Civil War, I think, because the actors looked similar. So I was like, again, Alex, why are you stealing from yourself? But I love that it did. Yeah, it showed the world where, there is an outside world that he is not privy to. I would love to know what iPhone they were using, because it's supposed to be 2030, and I would have thought like iPhones had just run on like, I don't know, sunshine at that point.
It might not have been like the newest iPhone that he had.
Exactly. But I think that it's good that you need another character to kind of bounce off the two of them, especially because Jodie Comer's character pretty much spends the majority of the movie like Dory from Finding Nemo. She doesn't really know what's going on. I think the thing that I kept wondering, and they didn't do this, but she keeps calling Spike her dad. And there's a moment or two where she believes she is with her father. And until they said her name, which doesn't come until like later in the movie, I think, or at least that's what I heard, they have very thick accents. So maybe they said their names earlier. But I kept thinking it would be really great if Brendan Gleeson shows up, like, and that's the grown-up version of the girl. And that the fantasy she has is so that was my question. I was like, that would have been a really cool little tie, bittersweet tie-in to say that this is the the grown woman now that was the teenage girl in the first film. But that's cool. Why I don't make the big dollars, apparently. So
I love that. Going back to the infected for a moment, because again, I was waiting for something a little more like explanation or something, because they're showing them like in a river cleaning themselves off, which is something we never really, or at least just like splashing around. I'm used to these being like sharks where they're just like going and going and going and not just stopping. So I'm like, for a moment, I thought, what if these were non-infected that are just gone feral? Like
That's a that's why I said the comparisons to them just kind of being wild people, the woods, essentially what you would call inbred, that's a very real possibility because there is some sort of awareness. Now, mind you, would not be surprised if in the next movie they say exactly that same thing, that, they're not technically infected. They're just, people that have gone nuts by not having any communication and being traumatized for 28
right.
years. Who knows? I mean, I did the only, and I think it's very funny that people are walking away from this movie talking about the nudity. I think that's the big thing that I've noticed a lot of people discussing is like just how much nudity is in this film. It's so pervasive. Like there is a scene where the main guy is running down like a bus, and it's just there's a lot going on. But I think what was fascinating in all the conversation that people are having about nudity, I talk a lot and I write a lot about Gen Z not being into sex scenes and being very chaste with their films. I'm very interested to see how younger people take to this because according to them, they're not really interested in nudity. They don't want to see it. And this is very, it's not necessarily like old school, like classically filmed type of nudity. I mean, Danny Boyle in 2002 putting your lead actor just naked in the first frame. I mean, he really is kind of, I think, playing too with a lot of the filmic taboos that we still kind of have today regarding actors and nudity. I thought it was very fascinating amidst all of the these people are just so naked.
Right. And then real quick, going back to the infected a little bit. Also, yeah, I just don't understand, again, from based on what we know of the virus, that they would stop and have sex either. Like, it doesn't seem like they would have any of those carnal impulses other than, just fucking up whatever they find.
That was my mom's big takeaway. She said pretty much exactly what you said. She's like, she's like, I've grown up on, Romero films. They wouldn't be doing that. And, it almost made me wonder kind of if this is a natural evolution, if this is their kind of like Neanderthal phase, like are we at a caveman stage at this point where there's some awareness and some consciousness, but they don't, have anything else?
Well, again, these are all great ideas. I'm not saying that the movie can have them, but at least like address them. Like it feels like there's like they have like 28 years worth of ideas that they're trying to cram into this movie, and it doesn't have room for it all. You're like, oh, infected's having a baby. That's a thing. Okay, moving on.
I was like, never would I have thought the movie where we started with, the kid having to like shoot a zombie that's being hung upside down like an Abu Ghraib victim would transition into a bittersweet story about learning how to cremate your mom's head while there's a baby in like a Target basket that clearly I was joking with my mom afterwards. I'm like, this child is going to have to need so much therapy when she grows up. Like, her hearing is screwed because they're shooting guns in the bus when she's like 5 seconds old. So her hearing's done. Well, and she's clearly, her parents maybe are zombie, primitive, inbred people. I worry about this child now.
Well, and again, because I'm conditioned to expect the worst thing I think Game of Thrones broke me a little bit, where like I'm conditioned to expect like the worst thing possible to happen in these kind of movies where I'm like, I thought the mother's like water was going to break on Jamie Comer and she was going to get infected, or I thought the baby was going to try to
been interesting. Yeah.
Or I thought the baby was going to try to breastfeed from her, like was going to snap and like breastfeed from her and then turn her infected.
All of these are valid questions. Like here's the thing. I don't want to give Zack Snyder flowers for anything, but the remake of Dawn of the Dead was pretty simple. Okay. Russian chick gets bit, she's pregnant, baby turns, and you get zombie baby. Okay, like that makes sense. Okay, it's stupid, but it worked. So you kind of need to give us just a smidge. Now I get it. The world is, the characters only know as much as we know, and vice versa. So they don't have machines, as Ray Fiennes says. They don't have the ability to blood test and stuff like that. So I get it. I get the why. I just just don't think it works for a film like this.
Right. I had a thought and I just lost it. Yeah, again, they take almost too many big swings. And again, maybe the sequels will redeem them. We'll see. And thankfully we won't have to wait like 7 months. Okay, now let's talk about the big finale. The big, like, not in a million years. Because again, I'm waiting for like to figure out who the boy from the very beginning is, because obviously he's gonna have to figure into this somehow. And then Spike is just, I don't know, going on his vision quest or something.
He's a man on his own now. So he's delivered the baby to safety. His mom's head sits atop the bone pile in Ray Fiennes' front yard, and he's on the road, Jack Kerouac style.
Right. Which again, how long is anyone, especially a kid with a limited amount of arrows, really gonna last?
This kid was only out with his dad for, maybe like 8 hours, and he, didn't have a great kill count by that point, and now he goes on one long walk with his mom, and he couldn't keep it, like, within the first 10 minutes, he falls asleep, and his mom has to save him. So I don't know. I was not thinking that he had just all of a sudden become, a sharpshooter and was going to be able to survive more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, like I figured he'd have more confidence or whatever. But anyway, so obviously he gets in over his head very quickly, and I was fully expecting the father to show up and save him, and then they reunite, and then they would bring him home and then end the movie. But no, the kid from the opening shows up with all this bling in the tracksuit and like golf clubs or something in the gang.
Yeah, they start parkouring and flipping and doing karate kicks. I would love to know if Danny Boyle watched Anna in the Apocalypse, because I kept saying, this is, if you've seen that film, there's a great moment where the high school jocks sing a great song while doing similar like war moves and killing zombies with like watermelons and shit. It's very funny. And I was like, oh, this is that, right? This is the soldier at war scene. I knew Jack O'Connell was in the movie. I knew that because I looked at IMDb and I was like, well, the movie's almost over. Where is Jack O'Connell? Like, what? And he literally shows up in the last 30 seconds of the movie with a blonde wig. Everybody's got blonde wigs. Everybody's got tiaras. They're very glam, in tracksuits, doing parkour. And I was like, what am I watching? This is not the end of the movie, right? And it's credits. And I was like, there's some sort of mid-credit scene that's going to explain this, right? No. So I had to, I don't know. Did you do research after? I researched what? Go on. I was going to say, did you research?
Cut out for a minute. What was the last part?
I was going to say, did you research? Because I did research on like what the ending meant.
Oh, not yet. I figured the movie just came out. People are still like,
yeah. So I
like,
mean,
there's gonna be a bunch of
I don't know. I don't know if it would help in this.
I mean, in the context of the movie, I have no clue. I'm assuming the sequel is going to probably address this in some way. What the hell's going on here? I think it felt to me like the scene in Dawn of the Dead, the original, with the pie, where the biker gang starts throwing pies at zombies. That's what it felt like to me. Like something completely ridiculous in the middle of this really, serious drab movie. And Danny Boyle's like, you know what? I'm going to end on this like comedy note and just kind of leave you with your like jaws dropped.
I mean, I kind of would have, I kept saying, if this doesn't tie into the next movie, I would actually probably tip my hat to just being like, we're just going to make an ending that doesn't make a lick of sense. F you, we already got your money. You already sat here for an hour and 55 minutes. I did some research on the side after, because people, other critics have been talking about how they didn't think the ending was going to make any sense to Americans. And I was like, why is that? And so I Googled, and they were talking about how Jack O'Connell's character and the tracksuit wearing dudes that he's got, they're all dressed like Jimmy Savile, who was a TV host for children's programming in the 60s and 70s in Britain, who decades later, before he died, was denounced as a notorious pedophile.
Oh, that guy. Ugh.
And so they're all that. Essentially, it's what they're going for: the hair, the tracksuit. The character's name, if you look on IMDb, is Jimmy, and all of his followers have different names. So they're like, is this a world where essentially Jimmy Savile wasn't denounced as a pedophile and like now has this weird cult that's associated with him? Is that a thing? So I was like, I don't know if again that makes it any better or worse for any of this. I do think that if this is some sort of weird like cult or whatever, and they're all, if you look at the movie, there's references to the Jimmies throughout the film. The body that Spike finds that is hanging has something carved into his person, and it's the word Jimmy. So there's that.
Some graffiti with Jimmy on it.
Yeah, so they're all, that's clearly it's gonna, but then other people have been speculating, is it a call to something regarding Cillian Murphy's character, whose name is Jim in the first film? So I don't know, but I was just kind of like, if Danny Boyle put in like British history Easter eggs in this movie, I mean, again, more power to him, because like if anything, it'll force people to learn about British history, I guess.
I've probably learned more about British culture from Danny Boyle movies than I have pretty much anything else.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Train Spotting was like what really got me into that kind of thing. So yeah, that's the movie. I don't know. I really struggle with what it feels very incomplete, because it really does end on that weird note, and like I don't feel like I can really appraise this movie until I know kind of what the next movie is, and then I can fully it's like it's like only watching a third of a movie. So you can't really judge it by that. But I appreciate it for trying things and having lots of ideas and having some really beautiful moments and some beautiful music. And I think the kid is a fantastic actor. I thought he did really, really good. So hats off to him, because child acting can be a real pain and really tricky. So he really carries the movie really well. As a horror movie, it was definitely tense, especially like in the first half. Again, it doesn't feel like a complete movie to me on many levels. So like it doesn't leave me as satisfied. And I know it's not supposed to be satisfying per se. So it's kind of hard to know what the goal of the movie is. What's the movie trying to do, and what terms it should be judged by.
Yeah, I mean, I had fun with it. I like the craziness and the inanity of it. The cinematography, I mean, it's Danny Boyle's longtime cinematographer. It's beautiful to look at. The score, like you mentioned, by Young Fathers is beautiful and gave me some real Clint Mansell vibes, which is always great. I told everybody, and I still stand by it, this movie has everything. Okay, spines, cremation tutorials, Aaron Taylor Johnson's beard. But it's definitely one of those we're now kind of moving away. I gave this a B- initially when I wrote the review. I probably give it a C+. Kind of looking at more at the holes. But I would say, having watched a lot of movies that have no business to exist purely because they're an IP grab, this is definitely one of the ones that at least makes me feel like it doesn't exist purely to just kind of re-up the copyright. Like it feels like they might have had a movie idea. I'm interested to see what Nia DaCosta does, in terms of making something different. I mean, Juan Carlos Fresnadillo, who did 28 Weeks, did a really good job taking, the established world that was in the first film and doing a sequel. So, regardless, they've already got my money for the next one.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. All right, Kristen, that wraps everything up. Thank you for coming on. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, I am always online at Kristen Lopez 88 on all social media. You can read my reviews and my writing. I run a Substack called The Film Maven. That's The Film Maven, 2ms.substack.com. I do a podcast about old Hollywood called Ticklish Business. You can find that wherever you get your podcast. My first book, But Have You Read the Book, is out now. You can buy it wherever you get books. And my next book, Popcorn Disabilities, comes out November 13th.
Excellent. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone for listening. We'd really appreciate it if you would give us a rating, review on iTunes, a rating on Spotify, a like and subscribe on YouTube, and give us a follow at Dads from the Crypt Talk on TikTok. With that, we thank you for listening to Dads from the Crypt.
Follow Dads from the Crypt on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or I will follow you to the grave. No, seriously, you really should watch. But be careful what you ask for. You may get it.